In our previous segments, we've discussed how children are affected by disaster and information that helps adults working with children affected by disasters to form reasonable expectations for their adaptation process. In this segment, we're going to address the fact that children's adjustment is connected to the adjustment of their primary caregivers. A reality that teachers and other professionals face in supporting children's adjustment is that children's families may also be struggling through an adjustment process. We'll hear again from the mother and daughter team of early childhood professionals, Margaret and Liz, as they discuss the adjustment their own family went through in response to the dislocation and change Katrina brought to their lives. Then, school teacher Melvin Norwood will describe some of the upcoming issues for his family and community.
While it's a disaster, there's a lot of different things involved. There's moving, there's loss of family for some, loss of the community. They're used to being in certain places and now needing to make new friends or, find a new place to go grocery shopping and all of that, and how constant in flux that is. We talked to some of Glenn's family in Mississippi a few days ago who had bought a house, and you stop and think, well, they have a place to live, somebody's working, we know where the family is, and then everything's back to normal, but it's not. They're still adjusting to a new place. Grocery shopping takes hours, even when they've returned. Mm-hmm. And so I think just that constant change.
You're also in a state of shock because you're watching television and you're seeing all these horrible things going on, and you're thinking, I wonder if the lady that worked at Walgreens got out because she didn't have a car because I saw her get off the bus all the time. And things like that. I wonder if the man that mows my grass, I hope he got his baby out. And I mean, you don't know their telephone numbers, so you can't really call them.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yes,
and it takes a while. Oh, yes. That, and I can't find a decent cup of coffee. New Orleans is very particular about their coffee. And, I mean, to this day, 6 weeks, I still have not found a decent cup of coffee. And my son has promised me he will send me my coffee. But it's amazing how much food and drink mean to a New Orleanian.
I think what amazed me the most was just exactly how thrown everybody was, which sounds like a really stupid thing to say. But we, Glenn and I, my husband and I, were the ones here, unaffected except that all these people were here, saying, okay, you need to find a place to do this, Sam needs to get in school, these things need to happen, and very much for those first couple of weeks taking on that parent role almost and telling everybody what to do. Okay, Sam needs a bed. We're going to find him a bed, and we're going to call you, and we're going to tell you who you need to call. Have you called them yet? I mean, really very much hand over hand helping to get through because they were so stunned. And these are perfectly reasonably intelligent people who in other circumstances have done the same for us.
When she told me about the school, my first reaction was, why does he need to go to school? He has a perfectly good school in New Orleans. Even though I knew by then they had canceled the semester and it wasn't there and it wasn't open, I kept saying, I kept thinking, but we're going to be going back in a few days and he'll be in school and I'll be teaching. And then I would say, no, they've closed it. It's not there anymore. And it's right. I mean, you have no reasoning capabilities. I wonder about Christmas, because Christmas won't be the same. Thanksgiving won't be the same. Halloween won't be the same either. Mm-hmm. When you hit all the holidays. And I feel sorry for anybody from New Orleans who's not there for Mardi Gras, because they have promised there will be a Mardi Gras, even if it's a little bitty one, and we will all turn out to go watch the parades because it will be a civic duty. And there's a lot of grieving, too. And I think the Gulf Coast was this way. It's just a different lifestyle down there. And I can move to Auburn and love it. But there's certain things I would always miss about New Orleans if that were what I did. It won't be that, for a year or two because I need to go back to work. And you feel an obligation, even though part of you says it would be best to stay here, there's another part of you that says, but I love where I was. I need to go back and help build it back up. And then once I've built it back up, then I can decide what I want to do. And I think a lot of families are having this mental discussion within themselves. You know, do I go back and commit to New Orleans, which I love, or the Gulf Coast, which I love, or do I just make a new life for myself?
So there's this loss a lot for that family connection that they had, and all those places where they've grown up and known, a lot of them are gone. He said to me, it stunned me, we'll never be able to drive with Joe, our little boy, and show him where we met, and show him, you know, where we had our first kiss, and oh, we won't. Oh, that's right, all that's about to be bulldozed. I forgot. Oh. And so there's a real loss of that personal history, which is just one more added stress for the families. The children obviously don't understand it. I think just to let people understand it's a constant state of change, and it does cycle through just over and over and over again.
Yeah, people are transitioning from being in New Orleans to being in a completely new city where they may not have their family. When you were in New Orleans, you knew that I know exactly where my mother lives here, my grandmother lives here, my uncle lives here. But now that, you know, part of your family's in Houston, parts in Dallas, parts in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I have an aunt who has even been evacuated to Denver, Colorado, which is a big difference for us, especially when you've lived in New Orleans for so long. So it's a big transition for people not to be able to put your hands on your family members and to have to depend so much on telephone communication or even talking over the internet or emailing with your family. It's been a big transition. I'm glad to be the pillar of strength for my family right now in this time of transition, and I'm trying my best to help my parents to cope, because my mom still thinks a lot about, okay, now we transition to Auburn. My mom doesn't have a problem with staying here, but my dad, he worked for the Sheraton Hotel for 22 years, so he wants to go back to New Orleans and finish, you know, what he started so that he'd be able to retire from the hotel. So that's a transition that they're having to consider. When the hotel calls us back, what do we do? Because we're sure if they call us back and we don't go, we'll definitely lose our job. So it's a big decision. I wouldn't say a hard decision, but a big decision. If my dad is called back first, he'd have to go, and maybe my mom and my brother would have to stay here. But the school systems in New Orleans, especially on the side of the river that we lived in, they have no intention on reopening this year. So that's another thing that a lot of people aren't thinking about. Though the city has been open to repopulate for everything except the lower Ninth Ward, the schools aren't opening. So jobs may be there and water that's drinkable and potable may be there, but there are no schools, so people can't come back if their children don't have schools to go to. So that's another thing that I think we need to realize. You know, there are a lot of logistics that go along with this disaster that sometimes we don't see.
One of the things that strikes me about these two clips is the fact of a sense of community has been lost. And community is the biggest predictor, or one of the biggest predictors of how people cope or how they adjust to the traumatic events such as a hurricane or a loss of their home, their sense of community. Sense of community is really important. We have to realize that many of these families are not your traditional two-parent family. You have single parents, you have grandmother, grandfather raising the children. You even have situations where you have foster care and other types of situations where children don't have a lot of stability in one sense, or they have a unique family type in another. So you really have to focus in on what community do they have, what sense of community do the parents have. And there's this sense of nostalgia. And nostalgia for what we had in our community is a really, really good thing. The issues of Mardi Gras, Halloween won't be different, coffee doesn't taste different. So it's a sense of home and what is familiar that we have to get back to. And you can create a sense of familiarity or a sense of homeness right here where we're at, but it just won't be the same. Now, I can adjust and I can start to find this as a home and act proactive and have a sense of community where I'm at, but it's very, very difficult, especially with the severity of the trauma. They're displaced, their home is destroyed, a sense of safety has been destroyed, and it's not coming back anytime soon. And in many of these areas, like they said, their schools are shut down. there's not much they can go back to. And so it's like this nostalgia for a time lost, and which can be very, very difficult for them. And I don't know, when I went down there and I saw in the Gulf area all that had been destroyed and what there wasn't, I just know there's not, that sense of community is not going to be built up anytime soon. And then you face issues in school with what the school can do for a sense of community.
Well, and that makes a good transition, because in reality, the one thing these children have that's constant is that most of them are going to go back to school, but it's not in their community anymore. So it becomes paramount that the schools provide that community. And it's not just for the children, it's for the families. So what becomes critical is that schools provide the information, the outreach, and the services that will help families get through this process. And even sometimes that's linking them to other resources. One of the critical elements of that is for schools to create an environment for which children and family members, and even the teachers and the school personnel, feel comfortable reaching out. We've talked about how important it is and how challenging it is for children to talk. If an environment is not created where they feel that they're supported, and that people want to hear their stories, and people want to know what they're experiencing, they're not going to reach out. And that's the same with families. If the schools do not find an avenue to reach out and say that we're here, and we can help you find mental health resources in the community, we might be able to connect you with other services in the community, that's just a perfect way for those two groups of people to come together. And within the school, we talk about the kinds of activities that schools can do, and some of that are counseling services. That might include individual, group counseling services, guidance units where the school council will go into the school and talk about these events. And that's beneficial for the kids who've been directly impacted and indirectly impacted. We've talked a lot today about how even children who are not directly involved experience some trauma from this experience. Some other things that schools can do are to use some kinds of classroom activities that really facilitate healing. That might be problem solving, helping the children find ways where they can participate in activities that raise money for children who've been impacted, things that make them feel like they can make a contribution. In addition, it's part of that helping them deal with their own stress is providing them some information about this is how children who have experienced this might respond, so that there's some sense of normalcy. And all of this contributes to what really is the best thing that children have going for them is their resiliency. If we help them work with the skills that they have, we might get them in touch with the things they've used to cope with in the past. Schools can really provide an avenue for children and their families, and a link to services such as mental health services if the needs of the child are far too great for the school to deal with. But lastly, the school in this process has to pay close attention to the people who are providing those services. As the example, the tape we just saw, many teachers are directly impacted by this, and teachers and school counselors can be indirectly impacted by this kind of trauma. Just that vicarious nature of helping these kids and helping them re-experiencing these events can be difficult. So schools need to provide that support to their staff. And I think this is a good opportunity for Judy to talk with us about the other ways in which we can help parents within the community deal with the outcome of this event.
I think the first big step is to just recognize the importance of parents. Recognize that one of the best ways to reach children and help children is by helping parents. And many of those parents were also impacted. So the next point is to make sure that you provide some nurturance for the parents. They themselves need to have their needs met before they can help their kids. So it may mean listening to their stories. It may mean, of course, making sure their basic needs are met. Maybe helping them find a job will be a way to help the children. Also, I think it's important for them to have some time away from the kids so that they can scream and yell and cry and be upset without worrying about how that's impacting the children. I know there are friends of mine who have worked in disaster child care. If child care is available that lets the parents go out and look for the job or clean up the house or whatever they need to do without worrying about how the kids are doing, and the kids then can be with other children who understand their experiences. I think another piece related to that is we need to give parents words that they can use with their kids. Many parents feel really helpless and feel that they've lost their role or they're not being good parents because they weren't able to protect their children from this disaster. So they may need some help finding words that are realistic and honest that they can use to reassure their children. They can't tell their children, don't worry, I won't let anything bad happen to you, because something bad has happened. But they can say, don't worry, no matter what, my love will be with you. I will do everything I can to protect you, which they can say honestly and they can say realistically. And it would be a good opportunity to bring in their faith if they have a religious approach to these issues, share how they use that faith to deal with bad things that happen in their lives. I think another thing that we can do is give materials to parents so that they've got some education, they've got some background to understand how the children develop and what to expect from them. I think you can also bring parents together so that they can talk to other people who have dealt with the same thing. They can share stories, they can laugh, they can cry, they can talk about something that their child said and get a new perspective in how to respond. I think that you can also help the parents find a way to find their own interpretation and recognize that they need to interpret the events for their kids. We can't put our values on all parents. They need to decide what values they are going to interpret through this event. And I think help them and the children, possibly together, to do something to get out of the victim status. They don't have to just be helped all the time. They can still help someone else. And I think it's really helpful to look for concrete things that they can do. There are always other people that they can share with. They're not only the people who need to receive.
I think what was highlighted is the sense of empowerment, that honest empowerment is, and I think back to at the school, my children's elementary school, where they raised money and they raised like $29,000 for victim relief, and there were some children displaced at the school, and so they get involved and they get to talk about what they're doing to help the process. And I remember my children calling home their cousins, and their cousins talked about putting packets of things together to help out and send to the Gulf states, and several people in churches. We talked about a sense of community with churches, but coming up, being displaced from the storm, and then going back to Mississippi and Louisiana to really help out with their church or with Salvation Army or Red Cross, doing those sorts of things. And so they get involved, and that really does develop a sense of community, this sense of involvement. And it was funny because I was down in Louisiana, and I was handing out some of these packets of goods to families, and my nieces and nephew they were wondering if I was handing out packets of stuff that they had made. And so it does create this sense of involvement, especially for children that have been displaced, or even their parents. And that's what we talked about, is parents getting away, because you need that moment of that solitude, that sense of being able to come to grips or come to an understanding of what it is. And that alone time helps you face what you've gone through and really let out those emotions.
Well, and I think, talking about community and what Judy said, the one element is finding for parents people who understand their experience. And at the school level, that's a very powerful thing for children, because often they have lost their support network, their friends. And so one of the things that schools can do is really emphasize the ways in which you can increase peer support. And what you talked about is one of the ways to do that, is to either bring children together who have had common experiences, not necessarily even this event, who can talk about that. But also bringing the students together to feel like they can make a difference. All of that creates a better foundation that children can relate to each other, understand each other, and talk to each other on a level that makes sense to them.
And it displaces that fear. That there's this fear of fear itself. This idea of, and it's just to be afraid, and that takes that away. That takes away the helplessness and that fear, and it helps them do something. Helps them process it.
Working on the front lines with families displaced or otherwise affected by disaster provides a perspective on the role played by the community at large in the sense families and children develop about what makes life normal. Amanda Outlaw is an urban regional extension agent with the Alabama Cooperative Extension System. She works in 2 Gulf Coast counties, Mobile County and Baldwin County, and has been extensively involved in working with county agencies, community groups, and schools to provide educational programming to increase family well-being and youth development. She spoke with Dr. Ellen Abel about her work of the past several months in identifying and addressing the needs of families affected by Katrina.
I'm a Mobile County Urban Extension Agent, regional, and I serve Mobile and Baldwin counties. And I work with families in community centers, schools, community clubs, churches, wherever there's a need, and then I go in and do the work.
Now that some time has passed, a couple months have passed since those first weeks when people were in the shelters. Are there people in the shelters still?
Well, in Bayou La Battery, they have closed down the main shelter that they had, and they have placed those people in condos on Dolphin Island, and some have gotten the FEMA trailers. And one of the families I work with, I was going to work with them on a Friday afternoon, and we were going to go out to dinner, and they called me and they said, "Don't come today. We just had a very upsetting day," because they had been promised a trailer. And up until that very moment that I talked with her, she thought she was getting a trailer. And then they told us that sorry. So she was just very upset, and she did not feel in a very social mood.
Have they moved to another place then?
Yes, they've been moved to a condo in on Dolphin Island. So I haven't been able to keep in touch with them, but hopefully I will. And the last thing I heard, that after they moved to the condo, that they felt a little better about the situation. But now this is still temporary. This is still temporary. And the father has to make about an hour's drive to where he was working. And the granddaughter is still trying to connect with her school, so they have to take her to school. And then her mother is a student at a junior college, Bishop State in Mobile, so she has transportation issues now. So everybody's trying to make the best of this situation, but they still feel that they still don't have a real place to call home. They don't still have that connection. And everybody needs that community. And it's hard to have that kind of community when you don't know from day to day how long this situation will last.
Right, that's true. Communities then have been pretty challenged. I mean, not just in Bayou La Battery, but some communities really aren't functioning like they used to.
No, nothing will be the same for a while. One bright thing that I can see with the whole displacement of people, some were in fair situations and been moved to a new situation. It might be a better situation than they were in, but that familiarity that you had in your community, connecting with that community, having some ownership in that community, that has been lost. And so it's going to be hard to regain that until you get to a permanent situation.
Well, what is it that perhaps we need to do, either as extension agents or as educators working with children and families in schools? Is there anything that we can do to make these kinds of adjustments easier on children or on the families?
Well, I think when we were talking earlier, we were talking about this family, and this little girl, she's 7 years old, had been a straight A student, good attendance, good attitude, good conduct in class. And the day I went down to talk with her, she had had a bad day at school, and she had just really acted out. And her parents were concerned, and grandparents were concerned, and they were really scolding her. And I said, wait a minute, time out. I said, remember, she went through the same disaster. And the emotions you felt, you passed them along to her. She didn't have a way to talk about how she felt. So she had to act it out. And you have to give her that much space to allow her to be able to grieve for her loss, because she's feeling it through you. And so she only expressed the way she could by acting out. And they knew that was uncommon for her.
Right.
So we knew that that was part of her grieving process.
Right. Well, that, for a child of 7 to be in a new school, that must come with a lot of adjustment issues too. I mean, these are not her classmates, right? And I know that you work with children in schools, school-age kids. What kinds of issues are they having about adjusting to being the hurricane survivor that is now in a classroom where other people were not affected?
Well, one thing, I've talked with some of the teenagers, and they have been talking about standing out, being referred to as a refugee, when they're just temporarily displaced, and not having a uniform at the very beginning. But now most of the schools are trying very hard to make sure that those children have uniforms. But still, you have lost that connectedness that you had with your teachers, and the teachers you have now, they don't know you. And so how can they write a letter of recommendation for you to go on to college or your next step for your educational path? So they're having to make new connections. And so we as educators have to remember that we have to accept these kids where they are right now and start looking at the things that they're doing and encourage them to get into some of the same clubs and organizations that they were part of, and have them to try to go back and make a list of the things that they have achieved thus far, so that they can feel that they are still connecting with them, and maybe put their school banner up in the hall, so that they can feel that this still is a community that I can relate to, and that I'm not the displaced or so-called refugee, because they're not refugees. They only had to move because of their situation. And so we can make them feel comfortable by listening to them and integrating them into all the programs that we can. And don't let them sit and feel sorry for themselves, because that's so easy for them to do, because they're around their parents who are upset because they have to travel so far to get to their job. Nothing is convenient anymore. You don't have your neighbors that you had before. So, it's just a new situation. But I think as a community, you can make a community wherever you are, but you know that this is short term, and that you have to have something within you that lets you know that I can deal with this for now because I know this is temporary. And so we have to find that spiritual part of us that brings us back to our center, and so that we won't get so depressed, because it's infectious at times.